Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our very first Wednesday webinar for the 2017-18 year. My name is Yokiko Hayashi-Sagil, and I work at the Washington Student Achievement Council.
And my name is Christina Winstead, and I also work at the Washington Student Achievement Council with the 12th Year Campaign.
And I'm Danny Ackleton, and I'm at OSBI School Counseling. And we're just very excited. This is our third year we've had these webinars. And so Yokiko and Christina are going to get started.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about some financial aid updates. But first, before we do that, we want to kind of remind you guys about we're providing resources to you, and we are committed to continue doing that at a K-12 approach to college and career readiness. So we want to really reinforce that we want to educate the whole child. And as you know, between the lack of knowledge and poverty and mobility issues, there's a lot of work to be done, and we want to ensure that every student gets the help that they need. Your leadership as a school counselor is key to this work, and we want to thank you for joining us today. So I just wanted to give you guys a schedule of what's going to be coming up for this year. We are in the very first one, as you can see, on October 4th. We do this in partnership, so it's really, really important to us that we provide you with resources and information that you're looking for. We cataloged what you guys gave us in terms of feedback for the upcoming year. So next Wednesday webinar will happen on November 1st, and we're going to be talking about the four-year college admissions standards and the CADR updates, and then we'll be back in December and so on. If you want to register, you can see the link at the very bottom of your screen. If you have questions, never hesitate to reach out to myself or to Denise, and we'd be happy to follow up. We wanted to update you on a new grant opportunity. So grant funds for school counselors or other staff who facilitate using content from the Southern Regional Education Board, or SREB, online Go Alliance Academy. This uses national research-based training modules with additional Washington State resources. All modules are online and about 6 to 8 weeks in length, and they begin in December of 2017. Clock hours will be offered for each module. So if you have any questions, we will follow up on that a little bit later.
So just so you know who we are, Washington Student Achievement Council, we have a pretty awesome mission. We advance educational opportunities and attainment in Washington State. Really excited for the work that we do here. But before we get started, we wanted to make sure that we had some common definitions about financial aid, because financial aid can mean so many things to different students and to different counselors. And so we just wanted to give some basic terms and definitions for you to be able to look at, so that as we go through this presentation, we all have the same definition of the things we're talking about. When we're talking about financial aid, we are looking at it as an umbrella. So it consists of multiple aspects, including grants, scholarships, loans, and work study. We're going to be talking about the FAFSA and WAFSA application today. When a student applies for a FAFSA or a WAFSA, they're applying for typically grants, loans, and work study. So especially for that work study for the FAFSA, I always encourage students, it'll ask them on the FAFSA, are they interested in work study, yes or no, or I don't know. If they're not sure, they can always decline it. It's a wonderful opportunity. I've had people come to me and tell me about their great opportunities through work study, and so I want to make sure that students are aware that they can decline that if they decide not to do it, but if they say no, they will not get awarded those funds.
Something else we really want to reinforce is that when students apply for financial aid, we are fortunate enough to have opportunities for students to apply, whether they are a student who is a citizen or an eligible non-citizen, and those students would apply for the FAFSA. And then for our undocumented students in Washington State, we have the WASCO, which is the Washington Application for State Financial Aid. And this is for your undocumented students, your DACA students, your dreamers. But we want to reinforce that when students apply for financial aid, they only have to do one application. So you don't have to have students doubling down to ensure that when they apply for financial aid, they do both. They just do one. When a student applies for the FAFSA, they are reviewed for both state financial aid and federal financial aid opportunities, so they don't have to do the FAFSA plus the WASFA. For our eligible students who can receive financial aid through the WASFA, they will be reviewed for eligible opportunities for state financial aid.
So let's talk about the aid that the programs that come with the FAFSA. So when a student is applying for the FAFSA and the WAFSA, just as a quick reminder, it is a free application for financial aid. So the first step here is free. They do not need to pay any money to apply for either the FAFSA or WAFSA. So these are some examples of federal funding aid programs that come through the financial aid application, the FAFSA. That is going to be Pell Grants, Federal Work Study, subsidized and unsubsidized loans, and parent loans. And then here we have examples of our state financial aid. So it's two different programs. The state financial aid consists of our state need grant, the awesome college bound scholarship, state work study, passport to college for foster youth, and we have an awesome trifold for alumni of foster care and those who are currently in foster care to help them understand all the resources available to them. The American Indian Endowed Scholarship, and then of course targeted workforce programs. And these are all considered part of Washington's opportunity pathways.
So online, in case you haven't seen this before, I really hope you have, but this is just an image of what the FAFSA looks like. And so here is where you're going to find information, or this is where students are going to start their new FAFSA, or if they're a returning user and they're applying for financial aid for this upcoming year, this is where they get that process started. We have noticed that they have been updating the way in which they link to the FAFSA. So instead of putting www, you can just type in fafsa.gov and it will take you to the safe link.
So the first step on this is going to be, as you can see on the screen at the very top, it says Home, About Us, FSA ID. A student's first step is going to be getting that FSA ID. So nothing has changed about that. The student and the parent are both going to want to get their FSA ID. They're going to need separate email addresses for that process. So the parent can't use the same email address for their student's FSA ID and the parent's FSA ID. Students need to be mindful that they will probably no longer have access to their high school email address post-graduation. There are some schools that have that ability, but most don't. So this is a great time to also talk to students about creating a professional email address that they'll be checking on a regular basis. And a professional email address is an email address that won't make an admissions officer blush. Just saying, I have read a lot of college admissions applications, and they do look at that. So this would be a great time to create that professional email address, and then start by creating the FSA ID by clicking in the third tab from the top, the FSA ID with the little lock on it. So here's a big update, the IRS data retrieval tool. I put this in the very beginning because I know you guys have questions about this. So the IRS data retrieval tool, the DRT, it allows for direct electronic transfer of processed tax information from the IRS right into the FAFSA. So what this allows parents and students to do is to fill out a FAFSA without having to be like, line 47A, and then, okay, it's this number, and then they go over to their computer and they type it in. It really reduces the number of errors that it can occur because it's coming directly from the IRS. This launched in the 2009-10 financial aid year. We know that this will also reduce your chances of being selected for verification, which we'll talk about later. And so if you do get selected for verification, there's some steps you have to take, but this reduces that chance. When you're getting your FSA ID, that's one of the steps to be able to use the data retrieval tool. So as a parent, if you're like, I don't know if I want to get an FSA ID, I'll just sign with a pen and paper. If you don't get your FSA ID, then you won't be able to use the data retrieval tool. Now, we do know last year in March that the data retrieval tool was disabled for security concerns, but they've addressed those concerns for this upcoming year, and it will be available. But the biggest change is the data that's transferred from the IRS into the FAFSA will be masked, which means that the parent or student who is using that data will not be able to see it. Only the colleges that the information is transmitted to after the application is complete will be able to see that information. Also, if you have students that you're working with who've decided they want to apply for financial aid for the FAFSA for this current year, for the 17-18 year, they will not add in the DRT tool back into the current last year's application. So you want to make sure that they're going to manually enter that information. And we have a webinar right online that walks you through that process of entering the information manually. Another big question that and change that has come is who is my parent? So this is a hard one for families. Who's going to be the parent on the financial aid application? So this is a great infographic right from student aid that will walk you through the process. And I encourage you, when you're having your financial aid nights, to print up these and put them out at the computers, or even have them as a backdrop, because it walks families through it. But the biggest change this year is that if the families, so if the parents are unmarried, separated, or divorced, but they are still living together, they do want both parents to file information. So they want information from both parents if they're still cohabitating. And they don't care if you're unmarried, separated, or divorced. If you're living together, they want the information from both parents. If the parents are divorced, separated, or not living together, then it's going to be the parent that they live with most. So that was the biggest change. So families will have questions about that, but this will walk them right through that process and decisions. Okay, so common FAFSA mistakes. These are the big ones. These are the ones that cause me my gray hairs. Number one is the actual FAFSA year that you're selecting for FAFSA or WAFSA. We are in the current 2017-18 school year, but your students will be going to college in the 18-19 school year. So they're going to be completing the 18-19 FAFSA or WAFSA. Again, the 18 or 19. They'll be using their 2016 taxes. And there's a lot of numbers I've thrown out there, but the real important piece is to make sure they select the correct FAFSA year. If they don't, then they'll be applying to this current year's financial aid application, and it won't provide them for funding for next year when they're going to college. You will want to have students print up their confirmation page of their application when they're done. It tells you at the top what application year they completed. If you do notice that a student's accidentally completed the wrong financial aid application year, you can have them go in and it will actually import the general information into the new application, and it's a quicker process to fill out that application. We call that the practice FAFSA when they've done the wrong year, and then we have them go ahead and do the correct year. You also notice this when you're looking at your FAFSA completion data through the portal, that if a student has told you, or even if you saw them complete that financial aid application, but it's not showing up in your portal after a week or two, always check to see if it's the correct FAFSA year or WAFSA year. That seems to be the number one. The other mistakes that we find pretty commonly is that they're using their legal name, their legal information from their Social Security card, and that also students, I know that they want to do this process quickly, but students, I hope they don't do this again this year, but last year I had students make up a Social Security number because they couldn't get a hold of mom or dad, and they decided to make it up. So like I heard some students whispering during one of our financial aid meetings, and I heard, make it up. And I thought, oh gosh, this is not a time that we make things up at all. This is where we use legal information. So I'm like, what are we making up, you guys? And I'm like, I hope it's a joke. And they're like, oh, we're just making up a number for Social Security. And they had linked their FSAs to other humans that are out there. It was just one of those like, every time that happens, you have to make a phone call to student aid to unassociate that information from each other, and it takes a little bit of time. So we want to make sure that they're using the legal information from their name, no nicknames, what it says on their Social Security card, and their correct Social Security number. On the income section of the FAFSA and WAFSA, on the sidebar, it'll tell you if they're asking for the parent information or the student's information. You want to make sure you're completing the information for the person they're asking it for, whether it be the student or the parent, and that you're using the correct tax year. It'll ask the marital status of the student. A lot of times I'll have students say that they're married because their parents are married and they think they're answering questions about their parents. Again, they'll want to look on the sidebar to see, are you completing the information for the student themselves or for the parent? Same thing with household size. So students will say, like, I have a household size under the student section of like 5 people, which means to me that that student has 4 dependents. But they mean that there's 5 people living in their house. Under the parent section, they'll probably be completing that the parent will be filling out that they have the 5 people in the house, but the student will be a household of 1. And then the number of people from their household that are going to college is important for parents to report the number of members in their family and their household that are going to college.
So when it comes to financial aid applications, we realize that students are coming in from all different parts of their lives, and that means that you have students all across the spectrum. So we really want to be sure about when we have a student with an unusual circumstance or a difficult circumstance, when it's time to defer and send it to the financial aid expert, especially when it comes to filing their financial aid. So when is it important for you to consult with a financial aid expert? Usually is you have a student who has a child, they have informal living arrangements, The homeless or at risk piece is definitely something that is very, very fluid, because sometimes students are sort of filling in this pipeline in very different parts. And so if you are concerned, or if you feel like you're working with a student who is not living at home or is at risk of being homeless, you definitely want to reach out to that financial aid advisor. And then you want to talk about, there are students out there whose parents refuse to provide their information and their income information, which means that a student's financial aid package is going to be very limited. So you want to make sure that they're getting the right information and that they're able to contact someone so they can understand what it is that the student is then limited to. It's also really important to think about when you have guardianship issues, or when you're working with a student who may be considered independent. And that's our students who are foster youth, emancipated minors, or students under legal guardianship. And so that's something that you really want to be cognizant of, is that these student situations can be very, very, very specific and very unique. So when in doubt, reach out to your financial aid experts, so that way we're not sort of assuming or making assumptions about what the student may need and what their aid package could look like. It's always important to incorporate that expert in, so that way the student has the right information from the very, very beginning.
There'll also be times when a student's going to want to contact that financial aid office. So we know that since we are applying for the 1819 FAFSA WASCO, we're going to be using that 2016 tax information, and things can change pretty quickly with someone's income. So if the family's financial circumstances have declined since they completed, since their income from 2016, and then them completing the application. So this, I mean, especially if they've lost employment, or any circumstance where that income has been reduced, they're going to really want to make sure they connect with the financial aid office to talk about maybe an opportunity to update their information with professional judgment. If the award offer that comes in is not affordable, you want to make sure you reach out as well, just to see if there's any other scholarships or supplemental funding opportunities that a student could apply for. Of course, applying for financial aid is that first step of many to pay for school. The second step, of course, is completing your scholarship applications. But some of these scholarship applications close at the same time as the admissions deadline. So we want to make sure students are applying for financial aid and foundation scholarships around the same time. And if you're concerned about maybe not being able to afford that school, but they know that the school is a really good fit for the student, talking to that financial aid office is great, because they know about that additional funding that could be out there. We know that it can be a challenge sometimes to get through by phone to financial aid offices. We encourage you to be persistent, because they have thousands of current students and then thousands of prospective students who are contacting them. So I encourage you, be persistent. Students, having them do this, it helps them be an advocate for themselves. They're always going to be their own best advocate, but we want to make sure that they're utilizing those skills really early on in the admissions and financial aid process. Plus, they're going to be working with these financial aid offices every year they're going to school, so they might as well start making friends in those offices and making those connections. So when a scholarship comes up, they think, oh my goodness, Susie Q, she is going to be a great fit for the scholarship. When she comes back in, because I know she comes every other week checking about scholarships, let's tell her about this. So as I promised before, we'll talk about verification, and here we are. 1 in 3 students are going to be picked for verification. I was picked for verification multiple years, even though I knew I filled out that application correctly. It's just something that they have to do. They have to verify the accuracy of information from your application. And so it's typically income that they're looking at. Don't be upset if you get selected for verification. I tell students it happens. It has nothing to do with you typically. It usually has to do with the questions they have for you. When a student is selected for verification, I encourage them to complete the process as quickly as possible, and at a bare minimum by the deadline the school provides, because they will provide a deadline, and those are hard deadlines. They're going to want to complete the requested supplemental information that school has asked for. Typically, this is the IRS tax transcript. This is going to be something they can order over the phone, online. There's several ways they can do it. It just depends on the information they can provide to verify who they are. they are not allowed to take your taxes anymore. The financial aid offices are not allowed to take your actual tax information. They need the tax transcript from the IRS. It is a data security issue. That's why when you try to bring them your 2016 hard copy taxes, they're going to tell you no. It's not because they don't want to look at all that lovely information. It's that they are not allowed to do it. So you just want to make sure you bring in that tax transcript so that your data is secure. It is very common, and if you have questions about the process, please connect with your financial aid office. Again, they will do this usually typically through an actual letter telling you that you've been selected for verifications. That the other piece is students need to open those letters. And read them. I had a student come to me one time and they put a letter on my desk and said, "What's this about?" And it was still sealed. And I looked at the postmark and it was from 2 months ago. And I was like, oh. And I almost wanted to put it to my forehead and say psychically what I thought it was, because I knew it was probably going to be a verification. I was like, "I think you're selected for verification, but how about we open it up and read it together?" And the student had been selected for verification 2 months prior. The deadline had passed a month ago when they needed to turn their stuff in. And so you want to make sure that they're reading those letters and responding in a timely fashion.
So when a student is completing their financial aid or application, or they're doing things online, there's this really great resource that they have available. It's under the Help tab on the FAFSA website. So here they've really tried to provide a lot of information to students and their families about what it is that they need assistance with. So I can't find my FSA ID. I need to reset my password. I don't know what information to input. How do I know who is going to be the guardian or the parent listed on the form? So this is where they're going to be able to find a lot of that easily and accessibly on their webpage, which is more instant than trying to call someone. And they try to make sure that it's very, very user-friendly, although everything could be more user-friendly, but it's just a great and quick way for you to be able to answer questions, especially if you're working with students and you're having them fill out the FAFSA online with you. So that way you guys can all troubleshoot the questions together.
So great news about the FSA ID. I know that lots of counselors have said, and I heard they heard you at the federal side too, about the applying for an FSA ID and the important date question. So it asked students last year, come up with a significant date that's not your birthday. And then they found out that high schoolers don't have a whole lot of significant dates, and what is significant to them can really change on a day-to-day basis. So like I had a student last year, their significant date, they couldn't remember it, but then when they found out what it was, they're like, "That's the day I caught a polywog on Pokemon Go." And to them, that was a real significant date, and that was adorable. And so they realized that students don't typically have those that they'll remember, and so they've removed that from the FSA ID worksheet. So you no longer have to put in an important date. It's going to ask them some variable questions that they get to make up. That's why it's important on our website. You can actually use the FSA ID worksheet to remember the questions that they've created and the answers to them, as well as their login information. So the WASCO application tool is going to look close to the same as it did last year. They're just going to go to readysetgrad/WAFSA. If a student's not sure on whether they should complete a FAFSA or a WAFSA, there is a five-ish question questionnaire that will walk them through whether they should complete which application, and then it pops them out to the correct application. A student has 3 steps. Once they go to the WAFSA page, they're going to create their account. They'll start their WAFSA. They'll select their schools, and then they're going to digitally sign their WAFSA, as well as their parent. They'll invite their parent to digitally sign the application as well. That electronic signature makes things a lot easier now. So all the student has to do is invite the parent through an email, and then the parent will go ahead and accept the invite and then sign it digitally.
So something we also want to hammer in is, if it's the most important thing about financial aid, is that students have to apply every single year. Now that we're on the calendar of opening up financial aid in the beginning of October, this is what we're going to be doing. So in the beginning of fall, every single year, we want to be ramping up and explaining, not only are you applying for college admission, but you're applying for financial aid for every year that you are in college. It's not just that first year when you're applying for college, it's every year that you want to be able to receive financial aid, you have to fill out an application. There's also other parts of the financial aid package which could incorporate work study, employment, and internship opportunities. So we want to remind students that financial aid is great. We want you to fill out that application, whichever one they do, and then remind them about different types of scholarship opportunities outside of just applying for financial aid. Then there's also that part that we've mentioned before. They need to get to know the financial aid officers in their school, because the easier they can make that connection and sort of connect with a counselor at their school, the easier it will be when they need to ask questions, because throughout the year, students will have things come up. If they are on a quarter basis, they're going to be touching base with the financial aid office every single quarter about their award and disbursement, and the same thing for semesters. And then we want to make sure to remind them that scholarship opportunities open up all the time, and that every single school has their own internal scholarship opportunities, but those deadlines can come up real quick. And then that's why we always talk about consider financial aid as a part-time job. So having those students dedicate an amount of time every single week to research, think about coming up with their activities resume and or a personal statement that they can modify, looking at opportunities through different offices. There may be some through a student services office. There may be some through different types of activities and things that they volunteer with. So just encouraging them to continue looking and don't stop, because if you stop, then there's no opportunities. You don't get scholarship funding if you don't apply for it. So we can't magically make that happen. I wish we could, but that's not how financial aid and scholarships work.
So we know this is a lot of work, making sure that all your students have the opportunity to complete the financial aid process. And we appreciate all the hard work you're putting in. I know they do too. You'll know because they'll contact you the freshman year of college and be like, oh, thank you so much for all that help. Can you help me with this year's? They definitely appreciate that help. How can we help you as a state agency? The Washington Student Achievement Council, we can provide training. We have content for admissions and financial aid, as well as sometimes we can provide actual event assistance. So 12th year sites, schools that sign up at the 12th year campaign site can, after they've reached out to all their opportunities, if they're still struggling for assistance, we have volunteers we can possibly connect them to. And if my calendar is open, then you will see me there. And I know some of the events have already started. We had wonderful events already happen throughout the state. And so I'm really excited. I keep hearing about, on Sunday, hundreds of students and families applied for financial aid on a Sunday. I did not think that would happen, because that's when football's on. And I thought, oh, people will apply on Monday. But then I get these notes back from events telling me like, oh no, we had 100 families show up. And I'm like, this is great. It's because you're creating these opportunities. We have webinars and other resources for you, including we have a PowerPoint for you to use for your financial aid nights that has notes on all the different common financial aid questions to help you walk through families the basic information about financial aid. We have printed resources, posters, postcards, stickers, and then we have electronic resources. So some of those same posters, but in electronic format. We have resource guides, activities, templates, a workbook that walks students through their junior and senior year and all the tasks that they can do to make a decision about what college they want to go to, a personalized decision on what schools they're interested in, as well as going through the financial aid process. And so if you haven't signed up for the 12th year campaign, I encourage you to go ahead and take a look to see if it's going to be a good fit for you. There's lots of ways to participate in this campaign. In the past, you had to fill out a site lead agreement and you had to follow these specific rules, and that was because we were part of a grant, but we no longer are utilizing that grant funding, so those rules have changed. So you can participate either as a full site where you are doing financial aid and admissions events. You can just do College Goal Washington, or you can utilize our resources and have your own events, but use it to supplement your events that you're doing. At the end of the year, we will ask you, I believe it's a 10-question survey. It's literally how many students approximately did you serve, how many applications approximately did they complete, and then it's going to ask you what you're looking for next year for training, and then most importantly, what languages would you like us to translate materials into? So that's what we use to create all of our trainings for the following year and make adjustments to our workbooks, as well as create resources. So I take all of that, and then June, I start creating all the resources for the upcoming year. You can apply now for the 12th year campaign. It's not too late. We have an example of our postcard that we have. We have that postcard that's in the bottom left in 5 different languages. It's currently in English, Spanish, Russian, Vietnamese, and Somali. You can sign up at bit.do/12th year. And then we have the posters in English and Spanish that tell people everything they need to bring to their event. And then we're using Google Maps this year so that students can find events easier by hovering over their region, and it will tell them about different events right closest to them. That is updated 2 to 3 times a week. So if you're a school that is having an event and you want it listed on there and you don't see it yet, let me know. I'm happy to get that on our map, because we want to make sure students have access to as many financial aid opportunities as possible. We know that not every student isn't going to be able to come to your school's event because of a million different reasons. A lot of it is sports and activities, and so it doesn't always line up, but we want to make sure we can refer them to an event nearby where they can get professional assistance with their financial aid applications. So they're not just doing it home alone, wondering if they're doing it right.
So last year, we had the fantastic opportunity to continue our partnership with OSPI and the Washington College Access Network. We were able to provide regional workshops in 9 locations last year, and we sort of focused a little bit on College Bound, the sign up, and everything like that. But this year, we're going to be focusing a lot more on financial aid and more of a train-the-trainer capacity. So we're scheduled to do one in every one of the ESDs that we have listed up here. We have some of them already finalized, but we're definitely still putting some together and putting them down in ink. So keep an eye out. As soon as we have updates, we will let you know. But what we really wanted to let you know is that we are going to be working in partnership with the Washington Financial Aid Association to be presenting this. We've also partnered with the Pacific Northwest, the PNACAC, Admissions Counseling Association, to provide these resources. So that way you're going to have access to not only OSPI and the Student Achievement Council, but we're going to be able to provide you with information about how to work with your students around financial aid to give you more skills and more opportunity and resources. So keep a lookout. We're going to be posting out information about this as we get more and as the registration starts to open.
We're really excited because this will be really timely information. March is typically when your students are going to see award letters, so we're going to have award letter information. We're really excited to be able to come out and see you guys again and partner with all these wonderful groups. We always have a great time last year, so I'm really excited about coming out again this year and being able to support you in the work that you're doing with students. So we encourage you, continue that conversation. You can find us online. We are on wasac.wa.gov. Of course, Gear Up has amazing resources, and they said use them. If you're not a Gear Up site, that's A-okay. They're still there for you to use. So go ahead and use the resources. If you're trying to develop a resource and you're trying to put something together and you're not sure if it already exists, my name's Christina. Email me. I will look for that resource before you start putting that together and see if I can find you one that maybe that way you don't have to start from scratch, or maybe it's already completed for you. And then, of course, the washboard.org is that scholarship website where a student builds a profile and it matches them to scholarships, as we call it, the eHarmony of scholarship websites. And so we want to make sure students are utilizing that in their hunt. We are on the tweets and the Book of Faces. So you can find us under Gear Up WA as well as Ready Set Grad. We will have informational tweets as well as Facebook posts reminding you about financial aid opportunities in your region. And with that,
so we are now at the point where if you guys have questions, we would love to have you ask them so we can be able to answer them. You can type them in the chat box. We will do our very best to ensure that we get everybody's questions answered. So it looks like we have a couple here.
Okay. While you're looking at your question, this is Denise from OSPI. I just want to mention that also all these resources are in Career Guidance Washington on the OSPI webpage. So we've done a really good job of connecting our resources. And of course, with High School Beyond Plan, a lot of the things that students complete in there can be used for some of their financial aid information. So we're going to see what kind of questions are here.
Okay, so question number 1, how does verification work for WAFSA applicants? The same as FAFSA. So they will be contacted by the institution they applied to follow up with additional information. Okay, so Dave. Okay, is there any way for counselors to know if a student's been selected for verification on their confirmation form, when they complete the FAFSA? So on the FAFSA, when they complete it, on the confirmation, I'll have to look and see if it's an asterisk this year or not, but there can be a little marker that designates that student's already been selected for verification. And so we want to make sure, I can look and see if I can find out. It's a little mark on the side, but you can kind of tell that they've been selected already. But the schools will also be selecting students for verification because they have a certain percentage they have to select. We wouldn't know those ones. Okay. Okay, the question is, and if I don't answer it fully, go ahead and type back in the chat box and I'll go into more detail. About once a year, I get a student or a past student who's 19 or 20 and is not living with parents and doesn't get financial support from their parents and doesn't have access to parent info. What do they do? So when they're completing the financial aid application, it's going to ask them their dependency questions. They have to be able to answer one of those 7 questions to show independence. Even if they are not living with their family, if they consider themselves independent, they may still be a dependent student. That's really when you want to contact that financial aid office, because if they have no access to the parents and the parents are not able to provide that information, they're not even able to get a hold of the parents, the financial aid office would be the best person to get that guidance from the schools that they're applying to. Okay. Gear Up resources, college spotlights are great. Do you know if we can get branch campus spotlights made? WSU, Tri-Cities, UW. Oh, so like for the branch campuses, we can ask them. That's something that we can connect with Gear Up about to see if they can do those for the branch campuses as well. Those are wonderful tools. I noticed they were decorating classroom doors with them last time I was I can't remember what school it was at, but it was really awesome to see those. So that's something I can bring back to the Gear Up office, John. I have no problem doing that. Okay. Linda, will you please send out a PowerPoint out that was geared for students, parents on FAFSA WASCO tonight? I'd be happy to. If you're signed up for the 12th year site, you got it in your week 1 update. It'll go out to everybody on the listserv.
Yeah. Well,
or on
whoever
signed up for this, you guys will be able to get them.
And it will be on Ready Set.
And it's on, yeah, and I think it's already on there.
Yeah, so for the resources for financial aid, the financial aid night presentation, we're going to be posting that on Ready Set Grad. It's just a general basic PowerPoint. We're getting that posted hopefully by the end of this week, beginning of next week.
Sorry if I missed this, but where will the PowerPoint be posted after this webinar? It's
Danny's going to be sending it out.
Okay. When a FAFSA comes back with an error and the student and parent and you cannot figure out what's wrong, what's the best thing to do? Contact the financial aid office of one of the schools they applied to. They'll be able to tell you the specific error that's on there. So if it says there's an error and you've tried looking at the income, that's the first one I do. Look at household size, look at the income. You're like, all of this is matching up. We put it in correctly. Contact that financial aid office because they'll know the specific code that was pulled to create that error. And then when the error is corrected, it will take a week or 2 to show up in the financial aid portal so that it'll show up as a completed one a little bit later. So that's all the questions I have typed in. I'm going to give it just a second to see if anyone else is like frantically typing. I wish I could hear the clacking of keys from a distance. I don't see anything else coming up. Thank you guys so much for the questions and for attending the webinar today. If you have questions, let us know. We're really excited at the start of the financial aid season is here, and we're here to support you through this process. And we're just really appreciative that you're giving every student the opportunity to complete either a FAFSA or a WASCO in Washington State. It's just really amazing.
Well, thank you so much for attending our very first 2017-18 Wednesday webinar. We will be back next month. We look forward to chatting with you again, and we will chat with you soon.